Sometimes life surprises you in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes a simple weekend at your cousin's house becomes something you never saw coming. This is one of those stories. My cousin Linda had this amazing gift. She could make any place feel like home with just her presence. Her house wasn't fancy or perfect, but it had something special about it. Not in a scary, ghost story kind of way, but in a warm, lived-in way that made you want to stay forever. It was the type of place where you could walk in, take off your shoes, and sink into that old, comfortable chair that had definitely seen better days. And honestly, that's exactly what I needed right then. A T52. Life had decided to throw me some serious curveballs. My divorce had been as friendly as these things can be, but it still left this empty feeling inside me, like something important was missing. Then there were my kids all grown up and living their own lives now. The house that used to be full of laughter and chaos had become this quiet, almost too quiet space that sometimes felt more like a tomb than a home. So when Linda called me up one Thursday evening and asked if I wanted to house sit for the weekend while she and her husband Tom went on their anniversary trip, I didn't even let her finish talking before I said yes. I was already mentally packing my bag before she hung up the phone. Linda's house sat on this beautiful tree-lined street in a part of town that felt like it belonged in a different world from my own neighborhood. My place was all clean lines and perfect lawns, the kind of suburb where everything looked the same. But here, the air itself felt different. It was thicker, richer, filled with the sweet smell of jasmine flowers and that fresh scent you get right after someone cuts their grass. Walking into Linda's house was like getting a warm hug from an old friend. The hallway walls were covered with framed photos showing the journey of her two boys, from tiny kids with missing teeth and big grins all the way to their college graduation pictures. Her youngest son, Leo, was still in college, and I have to admit, I sometimes felt a little jealous of Linda. Her house still had that energy, that buzz of life happening. My own home felt more like a museum displaying a life that used to be lived there. I spent that first evening in pure, wonderful solitude. I wandered around Linda's garden, which was this wild, beautiful mess of colorful flowers and herbs that had grown however they wanted. Then I found myself on the porch swing with a tall glass of iced tea and a book I'd been promising myself I'd read for months. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the houses, painting the whole sky in the most incredible shades of orange and purple, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: real, deep peace. Linda, being the thoughtful person she is, had left me a homemade lasagna in the refrigerator. I ate it standing right there at the kitchen counter, and there was something wonderfully freeing about not having to set a proper table for just myself. It felt rebellious in the best way possible. Later that night, I wrapped myself in this incredibly soft afghan on the living room sofa and spent time looking through old photo albums. It was like taking a trip back through time, seeing pictures of Linda and me as kids, remembering all those family gatherings and holidays we'd shared over the years. The house around me was so peacefully quiet. The only sounds were the gentle humming of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional soft creaking of the old wooden floors, the kind of sounds that make a house feel alive and lived in. It wasn't like the empty, echoing silence I'd gotten used to at my own place. This was a comfortable quiet, the kind that wraps around you like a blanket. I felt this wave of gratitude wash over me as I sat there. Linda had given me this perfect little escape, this safe haven where I could just be myself without having to think about all the complicated stuff in my life. Eventually, I made my way to the guest room at the back of the house. It was this cozy, welcoming space that looked out over Linda's wild garden. The bed was covered with a beautiful handmade quilt, probably something Linda had made herself. Knowing her, and the whole room smelled faintly of lavender. I slipped under the covers and found myself drifting off to sleep easier than I had in months. The last thing I remembered was the gentle sound of crickets chirping outside my window, like nature's own lullaby. It must have been well after midnight when something pulled me out of my peaceful sleep. It wasn't a loud, startling noise that woke me up. Instead, it was more like the whole atmosphere of the house had shifted somehow. I heard a soft thudding sound from somewhere downstairs, followed by what sounded like a door closing very quietly. My first thought, still fuzzy from sleep, was that maybe Linda and Tom had decided to come back early from their trip. But then I heard something that made my heart start beating faster: footsteps on the stairs. These weren't the quick, familiar steps of someone coming home to their own house. These steps were slow and careful, like someone was trying very hard not to make any noise. A little flutter of worry started in my stomach. After all, I was supposed to be alone in this house. I sat up in bed, my heart now beating noticeably faster, and strained to listen in the darkness. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door, and I found myself holding my breath without even realizing it. Then, very slowly, almost like someone wasn't sure they should be doing it, the doorknob began to turn. My mind started racing through all kinds of scary possibilities. Was it a burglar? A neighbor who needed help? Someone who thought the house was empty? The door creaked open with that soft sound old doors make, and suddenly there was a tall silhouette filling the doorway. The dim light from the hallway created a shadow that made it impossible to see who it was clearly. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't move or speak. He was tall, much taller than I remembered from the family photos Linda always sent at Christmas. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I could make out those familiar dark, curly hair and the shape of his jaw that looked so much like his father Tom's. This was Leo, Linda's youngest son. He hadn't noticed me yet. His eyes were focused on the floor, clearly trying to move as quietly as possible so he wouldn't wake anyone up. He took a hesitant step into the room, and I could see he was carrying a duffel bag over his shoulder. That's when it hit me. He must have driven home from college for the weekend, having no idea that his parents were away and that their guest room was currently occupied by his aunt. My initial fear quickly melted away and was replaced by something else entirely, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was a strange mixture of surprise and this sudden, intense awareness of where I was and what was happening. Here I was, in this intimate family space, and here was this young man who had grown up so much since I'd last seen him. Finally, Leo looked up, and our eyes met across the dimly lit room. I watched as recognition dawned on his face, followed immediately by a flush of embarrassment that even the shadows couldn't hide. Even in the dim light, I could see his cheeks turn red. "Aunt Sarah," he whispered, and his voice was this low, rich sound that was so much deeper than I remembered. "What are you doing here?" I found my own voice, though it came out a little shaky at first. "Leo, you scared me half to death." I tried to sound light and casual, but my heart was still doing this little rapid drumbeat against my ribs. A slow smile spread across his face, this charming, slightly crooked grin that instantly brought back memories of a much younger Leo, the little boy who used to follow me around like a devoted puppy during family holidays and gatherings. "I'm so sorry," he said, taking a step backward as if he wanted to give me more space. "I had no idea anyone was here. Mom and Dad didn't tell me they were having company. They went on a little anniversary trip," I explained, pulling the quilt up a bit higher around myself. "I'm just watching the house for the weekend, making sure everything's okay." He nodded, still standing there in the doorway. Even in his stillness, there was this energy about him, this vitality, that reminded me he was young and full of life. He was wearing just a simple t-shirt and jeans, but I was struck by how much he had changed. The lanky, somewhat awkward teenager from my memories had been replaced by this confident young man with broad shoulders and this quiet self-assurance about him. "Well," he said, and I could hear the amusement in his voice, "this is definitely a little awkward." I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, warm sound that seemed to break some of the tension that had been hanging in the air between us. The sound made him shift his weight, and his duffel bag bumped softly against the doorframe with a muffled thump. "I was just planning to crash here for the night," he explained. "I have this early class on Monday morning, and I didn't want to have to make the long drive back to campus tomorrow." "Of course," I said quickly, already starting to swing my legs out from under the covers. "This is your room, after all. I can easily take the sofa downstairs." It looked pretty comfortable when I was sitting on it earlier. No, he protested right away, stepping forward into the room. "Don't be silly about it. I can take the sofa. I've slept on that thing a million times over the years. It's actually pretty comfortable once you know how to position yourself on it." We stood there for a moment in this strange sort of standoff, both of us in the middle of the night, both trying to be polite and considerate. The air felt thick with this unspoken politeness, this shared understanding of how unexpected and unusual this whole situation was. But underneath all that politeness, I felt something else too. There was this connection, this little spark of something that felt both familiar and completely new at the same time. It was in the way he was looking at me, not just as his aunt, not just as a family member, but as a person, as a woman. And in that moment, looking into his eyes, I saw a reflection of my own younger self. It was like a reminder of a time when, Life felt full of endless possibilities and adventures waiting around every corner. Tell you what, I said, a sudden idea forming in my mind. The bed's plenty big enough for two people, as long as you don't snore too loudly. A surprised, boyish grin lit up his entire face. Deal, he said, but I can't make any promises about the snoring part. He dropped his duffel bag by the door with a soft thud and walked around to the other side of the bed. As he sat down on the mattress, I felt it dip under his weight, and suddenly I was very, very aware of how close he was to me. The scent of him, this clean, masculine smell of soap mixed with something that was uniquely his own, filled the small space between us, and I realized that this weekend was about to become much more interesting than I had ever imagined. It shifted, making room for him, my heart doing a little dance that had nothing to do with fear anymore. He was just a boy. I told myself my cousin's son, but in the quiet intimacy of that moonlit room, I felt like so much more. He represented a life that was still unfolding, a story that was just beginning, and for a little while, I felt like I was a part of it. He settled into the bed beside me, the space between us charged with a silent energy. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was present, a tangible awareness of another person in a way I hadn't experienced in a very long time. For a few minutes Webbeth lay there staring up at the ceiling, only sound the gentle hum of the house and our own soft breathing. So hesitated, his voice a low murmur in the darkness. How have you been, Aunt Sarah? Really? The question hung in the air, simple yet profound. It wasn't the polite surface level. How are you? I was too. There was a genuine curiosity in his tone, a depth that surprised me. It turned my head on the pillow to look at him. In the faint light filtering through the window, I could see the earnest expression on his face. I've been okay, I admitted the word, feeling inadequate. Life's been a little quiet lately. Henna did, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Mom told me about the divorce. I'm sorry. It was for the best, I said, and to my surprise the words felt true. We just grew apart, you know. I think so, he said, his gaze distant for a moment. I see it with my friend's parents sometimes. It's like they're living in same house, but in different worlds. His insightfulness caught me off guard. He was young, but he had an old soul. We talked for what felt like hours. Irvis's soft whispers in the night had told me about his classes, his passion for photography, and his dreams of traveling the world. I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone else, not even Linda. I told him about the emptiness of my house, the feeling of being untethered now that my role as a mother had shifted. He listened patiently, his presence a comforting anchor in the darkness. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet understanding that soothed a part of my soul I didn't even know was aching. He spoke of his own uncertainties, that pressure to have it all figured out, the fear of making the wrong choices, and in that shared vulnerability a bond formed between us, an invisible thread connecting two people at different crossroads of their lives. At some point this hand found mine in the space between us. It was a simple, innocent gesture, yet it sent a jolt of warmth through me. His fingers were long and cool, and Thalos through mine with a natural ease. It wasn't a romantic touch, but it was deeply intimate, a silent acknowledgement of the connection we had forged in the quiet hours of the night. I realized then that this unexpected encounter was more than just an awkward surprise. It was as if a reminder that life could still hold surprises. That new connection scowled be formed in the most unlikely of places. It was a gentle nudge from the universe, telling me that my story wasn't over, that there were still chapters left to be written. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, our conversation dwindled into a comfortable sense. He was still holding my hand, his thumb gently stroking the back of mine. It felt a profound sense of peace and contentment that had been missing from my life for so long. You know, he said, his voice thick with sleep, you're not just me, Aunt Sarah. You're a really cool person. A smile touched my lips. You're no so bad yourself, Leo. He squeezed my hand gently before pulling away and turning onto his side, his back to me. I watched the gentle rise and fall of his shoulders as he drifted off to sleep. I stayed awake a little longer, the first rays of the morning sun casting a golden glow into the room. I felt a sense of freedom, a quiet joy that was both new and familiar. The night had started with an unexpected intrusion, a moment of fear and uncertainty, but it had blossomed into something beautiful, something I knew I would cherish for a long time. It was a reminder that even in the quietest corners of our lives, the most profound connections can be made, and that sometimes the most unexpected detours lead us exactly where we need to be. I closed my eyes, a genuine smile on my face, and For the first time in a long while, I looked forward to the day ahead. He woke to the smell of coffee, not the instant kind I made at home, but the aromatic scent of freshly ground beans. The other side of the bed was empty, the sheets cool to the touch. For a moment, I wondered if I had dreamt the whole thing. Hushed conversation, the shared vulnerability, the gentle touch of his hand in mine. But then I saw his duffel bag still by the door and a small folded note on the bedside table. I picked it up, me heart giving a little flutter. The handwriting was a youthful scroll full of energy and character. And Sarah, it read, "Went for a run, coffee's on the pot, help yourself. It was really nice talking to you last night, Leo." A smile spread across my face. It was real, all of it. I get out of bed, feeling lighter than I had in years. I slipped on my robe and padded downstairs to the kitchen. The house was filled with the warm morning light, and the aroma of coffee was even stronger. Here a pot was brewing on the counter and a clean mug was sitting next to it just for me. I poured myself a cup in, took a sip. The rich dark liquid all come jolt to my senses. I leaned against the counter, looking out the kitchen window into the vibrant green of Flinda's garden. The world seemed a little brighter this morning, a little more full of promise. I heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of footsteps. A moment later, Leo appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face flushed from his run, a light sheen of sweat on his brow. He was wearing shorts and a shirt, and he looked even more vibrant and alive in the daylight. "Morning, Hazade." His voice, still a little breathless, gave me that same lopsided grin that had charmed me the night before. "Morning," I replied, my voice warm. "Thanks for the coffee. It's delicious, no problem," he said, grabbing a glass from the cupboard and filling it with water from the tap. He drank it down in one long gulp, his Adam's apple bobbing wested in a comfortable silence for a moment, the easy camaraderie of the previous night still lingering between us. It felt natural being here with him in the quiet morning kitchen. It felt like home, not the empty shell of a house I lived in, but a real home filled with life and warmth and the promise of a new day. "So," he said, leaning against the opposite counter, "what are your plans for today? Don't let me get in your way." "I didn't have any plans," I admitted. "I was just going to read and relax." "Sounds nice," he said, "but a little boring, don't you think?" I raised an eyebrow. "And what do you suggest?" "A wise one," he chuckled. "Eric." Full sound that filled the kitchen well, he said, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I was thinking of going for a drive. There's this little town up the coast about an hour from here. It's got a great little diner with the best milkshake you've ever tasted." He paused, his gaze meeting mine. "Want to come with me?" The invitation hung in the air, a bright unexpected possibility in the middle of me quiet weekend. A part of me, the sensible 52-year-old part, wanted to say no. It was too impulsive, too out of character. But another part of me, a part that had been dormant for a long time, yearned for an adventure, no matter how small. "I don't know," I said, a little hesitant. "Come on," he coaxed, his voice gentle. "It'll be fun. We can talk more. I want to hear more of your stories." And just like that, I was sold. The thought of spending the day with him, of continuing our conversation, of simply being in his vibrant presence, was too tempting to resist. "Okay," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "You're on, but you're buying themic shakes." "Deal," he said, his grin widening. The day was everything I could have hoped for and more. We drove with windows down, the wind in our hair singeing along to the classic rock station on the radio. He was a good driver, confident and relaxed, and I felt completely at ease with him. We talked and laughed, the conversation flowing as easily as it had the night before. Had told me more about his photography, his passion for capturing the beauty in the variety moments. I found myself telling him about my own forgotten dreams, the things I had set aside to raise a family and be a wife. The little town was as charming as he had described, with its quaint shops and friendly faces. We had lunch at the diner, and the milkshakes are indeed the best I had ever tasted. We walked along the beach, the waves crashing against the shore, the salty air invigorating. He took pictures of everything, the way the light hit theater, the patterns in the sand, the outer lines around my eyes, and in the way he looked at me through the lens of his camera, I saw myself in a new light, not as a middle-aged woman whose best years were behind her, but as a woman who was still full of life, a woman with a story worth telling. As we drove back, in the late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the road, a comfortable sense settled between us. It was a silence filled with a shared understanding, a deep and unspoken connection. I felt a sense of gratitude so profound it almost brought tears to my eyes. This weekend which had started as a simple escape from my quiet life had turned into something so much more. It was a journey of self-discovery, a reminder of the joy and beauty that can be found in the most unexpected places. And it was. All thanks to the boy sitting next to me, the boy with the old soul and the lopsided grin who had come into my life so unexpectedly. When we got back to the house, the sun was setting, painting Thesky in fiery hues of orange and red. Wes stood on the porch. For a moment, watching colors fade, neither of us wanting the day to end. "Thank you, Leo," I said, me voice soft. "For today, for everything." He turned to me, his expression serious. "Thank you, Ansara," he said. I really needed this." And in that moment I understood had both been a little lost in our own ways, and in finding each other we had found a little piece of ourselves. This weekend was almost over, but I knew that the connection we had made would last a lifetime. It was a bond forged in the quiet intimacy of the night, a bond of mutual respect and a shared journey of personal discovery. And as I stood there watching the last of the sun's rays disappear below the horizon, I knew that my own story was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just